che è qui presente con noi, professore alla Federico II di Napoli, e oggi pomeriggio Teresa del Giudice. I temi sono sicuramente, anche se di economia, sui focus che vi interessano sicuramente particolarmente. Questa mattina abbiamo Climate Crisis in the Agriculture, Food and Fishery Sector, Policy and the Tool of Manage of Transition. Quindi lascio la parola alla collega Fabian e qualsiasi cosa la gestisce con le domande, eccetera, secondo come vi darà le indicazioni, quindi come al solito. Buon lavoro ragazzi, grazie Fabian, prego. A te.
Grazie Stefano.
Mauro, sono Mauro io. Mauro Marino.
Scusami, è vero Mauro, scusami. C'era scritto Stefano sotto di te.
Sì, lo so, ok?
Ok. So let's start. Try to share my presentation. Okay, very short the outline of this discussion will be focused on the evolution of public policy in agriculture and the fishery sector, and then we follow making a focus on the climate, economics, and the market change in the last 20 years. And then we go to analyze the public support and risk management policies in agriculture and fishery sector, aiming to understand how public policy set a tool to manage the transition to a new global scenario. And then we have a focus on the tools aimed to cope revenue crisis in this sector. So concerning the public policy, you know, I don't know if all of you know the history of the evolution of the support for agriculture and the fishery, but in very short words, we know that public policy in the primary sector born after the Second War in a way to ensure food security for all citizens in the EU, and in a way to respond to societal requirement and to warranty a reasonable price for consumers. The most important thing that is the policy recognizes that agricultural sector, as far as fishery sector, is a topic sector for a crucial sector for the overall economic system. And the other question were to guarantee a fair income for farmers in rural area. So as we just say that European countries move up from after Second War, and of course the society, the economic system was totally different from now. So at the beginning of the CAP, the Common Agricultural Policy, the more important things were to protect the primary sector in a way to ensure self-sufficiency in terms of product, in a way to avoid to stress the life in a rural area, in a way to try to increase the social welfare for farmers and citizens in terms of consumption. So the starting point, of course, was the Treaty of Rome in 1957, but the question were that at the beginning of the CAP, the fishery sector was included in the agricultural policy. The Article 39 set the main objective for the increase agricultural productivity, ensure a fair standard of living of the agricultural community, stabilize market, ensure security of supply, and ensure reasonable prices in delivery to consumers. The CAP, the most important tools that affected the carry on of the CAP were the regulating the agricultural prices, the support income by subsidy, and try to foster on the mechanization. Well, the benefit from the farmers, the public support from farmers, were that European country reach self-sufficiency in a couple decades. Food security was assured, and agricultural market were stabilized, and farmers, of course, enjoyed an increase in their welfare. Summarizing, very short, I would focus it on the effect of the public support. So, of course, productivity in agriculture grew in that decades, and we experienced in the EU a sort of second agrarian revolution, where the food supplies increase in huge amount. But we have some externality from this kind of support, because of course we have a very strong difference from people that work in the agricultural sector, respect for other people that work in the other sector of the economic system. And then we experienced a sort of migration from sector and from country in that years. So what happened after the pattern of mechanization? Of course, yield increases a lot, and the agricultural prices showed a downward trend in prices that is clear that one of the reasons for the lag in income was due to downward trend in agricultural prices. This is due to the fact that demand for food, as you know, is income inelastic. What I mean? I mean that when income grew in the country due to economic growth, also happening now in the southeast of the world, China, India, and so on, people, of course, use this increase in income to buy other products more than food, because you know that we have a sort of satiety for food consumption. So few products in the primary sector were in much greater demand, for example, meat. But the most part of agricultural product, they are inelastic in terms of income. So the important question is that the farm incomes, we don't talk about yet about the fishery, because in the first year of the public support at the primary sector, fishery was linked to the CAP, so was identified as a farmers. So the income of the farmers increasing depending on the public support, and was the most important tools that you used in the first decades of the implementation of the CAP was the protection from import from outside the EU. For example, one of the products that has been very protected from import was wheat, because you know that the most important production or market for cereals, so wheat, corn, and so on, are in North America, Australia, and Argentina. So if especially for France and Germany, we implement a lot the national production for this country. So what went wrong? That after that start a sort of pattern evolution of the SCP. We have overproduction because farmers push on production because they have the warranty withdrawal for overproduction. The problem of surplus began to emerge in terms of also of financial question. Big farmers produce more and earn more respect from small farmers, and we have also environmental externality from this kind of intensive use of chemical input and so on. So the Europe start to modify the initial support and thinking of the CAP in a way to evolve throughout the decades for public support that start for productivity, go to competitiveness, and then in the last CAP reform, we reach the concept of the sustainability. So this is a very short presentation of the evolution, the public support, in a way to give you the idea that public policy, not only for the agriculture and fishery sector, convey on the environment that surrounded the sector. So after the Second War, the big question were give food security for European citizens. Now we arrived at CAP public support that is mainly focused on sustainability, environment, and biodiversity. This is just a picture to give you the sense of this huge change in public support. So I think that the main CAP reform is the fishery reform that started in 2003. We have Germany, UK, Denmark, Netherlands, Sweden that were very support this reform, that looking for the first time at environmental and biodiversity question. Meanwhile, France, Greece, Ireland, Italy especially doesn't like this kind of approach for CAP. the main point of the fishery reform were the decoupling, support for farmers, so independently from what how much they produce. The other important pillar of the fishery reform were the cross compliance, that means the introduction of the responsibility for farmers to respect biodiversity, environment, and so on. The other important point were to revise some market issue, especially for milk and cereal sector. And for the first time, especially in 2009, in the health check reform, climate change come into the debate in the EU. After Fischler, the pattern toward to environment, biodiversity, migration, mitigation of climate change become more and more important till at the CAP program 2014-2020 that focused especially on the economic, environmental, and territorial challenges, build three policy objectives for respectful for viable for production for economics, sustainable management of natural resource and climate action for the environmental challenges, and balanced territorial development for the territorial challenges. So as you know, that the main point of the CAP are the integration of the three different challenges, where food security, price variability, and the response or economic crisis concerning the economic challenges, GHG emission, soil depletion, water, air quality, and habitats and biodiversity are the main point for the environmental challenges, and the vitality of the rural area and diversity of the EU agriculture are the response to territorial challenges. So the post-2023, so the actual set of policy the European Union answer at the question to reach the climate neutrality by 2050, reduce the CO2 emission, eliminate the present one from the atmosphere, so foster on the circular economy and foster on the green and fair transition. The Green Deal is equal to the green growth. So the main point of this framework, of course, rely on the green energy. So the EU foster a lot of the clean energy in a way to account more than 75% of EU gas emission, sustainable industry, the question related to greater protection of biodiversity, forest, ocean, and then looking at the primary sector, the farm to fork strategy that is the pillar of the actual CAP. So the strategy objective were to reduce the use of chemical pesticide by 2030, the half, so 50%, reduce the use of the most dangerous pesticide up to 50% by 2030, reduce the nutrient losses by at least 50%, and so on. So how you can see the very key elements of the actual support of the common agricultural policy is mainly devoted on the respect for environment, biodiversity, and so on. Keep in mind that these are most of the point that actually farmers neglect in the context. No, in the last weeks, we witnessed to farmer protests around several countries in Europe because they conflict with this kind of approach, because this approach, of course, negatively affects the economic sustainability for farmers, because increase production costs and leave farmers exposed to import from outside the EU, that from farmer that doesn't respect this kind of target for environment. So the new wide biodiversity strategy will focus on the restore degraded ecosystem and so on. So the main challenges was to positively affect, in terms of environmental externality, the life of consumer citizen in the EU. The common agricultural policy have specific objective that are depicted in this slide, and you can see that the overall portfolio of this specific objective are very ambitious, of course, but are mainly devoted on the question related at animal welfare, tackling climate change, resource management, landscape, biodiversity, and so on. So the question related to economic resilience of farmers are very, very tightly respect at the beginning of the public support in the EU. So the first pillar of the CAP now, you can see, set the overall public support shared on the 5 main points. So you have the basic payment that is the heritage of the past, in a way, to maintain a sort of income support for farmers. Then we have a redistributive income support mechanism that which would depend on the national condition. We have a voluntary payment for young farmers, but it's a voluntary, but at least the 3% of the direct payment must be used to support young farmers in a rest of income support. Then we have coupled support that reach only 13% of the direct payment, so they decrease respect of the previous CAP programs. And then we have 25% of the resources that are due to eco schemes. That is a very tricky question that we experienced in the first year of the implementation of this new program of the CAP. Concerning the rural development, we have that 1/3 of the overall budget should be devoted for the environmental action, for example, organic and animal welfare. And then we have a lot of measures that try to answer at the portfolio picture that we just have a glance 2 minutes ago. And so the measure range for quality schemes for agricultural products, investment in physical asset, and then we have in this context, as in the previous CAP program, the measure devoted to risk management that we have after focus on this question. And we talk only for agriculture, very short what happened for fishery policy. But really the fishery policy until 1970 was overlapped to farmer policy, so it was included in the CAP. Starting the real start, the start of the fishery policy is in 1970, and after 1983, the CFP had to be adjusted following Greenland's withdrawal from the community in 1985, and the accession of Spain and Portugal in 1986, and the reunification of Germany in 1990. These three events affected the size and structure of the community flat and the east catch potential. So we witnessed for example, the measure of the total allowable catches and quotas that has been introduced in this year. So we have in the following years some evolution of the public support. For example, in 1992, we have the regulation that aim to support the going fishery, and aiming to affect the fleet capacity and the catch potential, and so on. The very important reform for fishery sector is has been introduced in 2002, where the main objective of this reform was to ensure a sustainable future for the fishery sector by guaranteeing a stable income and employment for fishermen and supply for consumers, while preserving the delicate balance of marine ecosystem that, as you know, is a very big question. So the reform envisaged a long-term approach to fishery management, including the preparation of emergency measures, with multi-annual recovery plans for stock outside safe biological limits, and multi-annual management plans for others. So to ensure more effective, transparent, fair controls, the European Fishery Control Agency was set up in Spain, in Vigo in Spain, and the 2002 reform gave fishermen a greater say in decisions affecting them through the creation, for example, of regional advisory councils that are made up of fishermen, scientific experts, representatives of other fishery and aquaculture sector, as well as the regional and national authority and environmental and consumer group. The other reform in 2013 that is important just for the regulation 1379/2013 concerning the common organization of the market in fishery and aquaculture aquaculture products. So the new reform, the actual reform, is based on a multi-annual ecosystem-based management to reinforce the role that the previous reform had given to multi-annual plans, but also adopting a more ecosystem-based approach with plans for multiple species and fishery within the regional framework of the European geographical area. The maximum sustainable yields, taking into account the international commitment, such as those made in 2002 in Johannesburg summit. The new CSP set maximum sustainable yield as the headline target for all fishery. Banno discard the new reform will put an end to one of the most unacceptable practice in the EU fishery. So discarding of regulated species to be phased out, and in parallel, accompanied by measure will be introduced to implement the ban. By 2019, the new discard policy will be implemented in all EU fishery. With regard to fleet capacity, the rule governing the activity of the EU fishing fleet in international inter-country water will have to be defined in the context of the EU external relation. So in a way to ensure that they are in line with the principle of the EU policy. So the provision for fishing these waters are linked to sustainable fishery partnership agreements and EU participation in the regional fishery management organization. The sustainable aquaculture increases yields to supply the EU seafood market and promote growth in coastal and rural area through national plans. Concerning the new obligation on member states, we have to strengthen the role of science, intensifying data collection and the sharing of information stocks, fleets, and the impact of fishing activity. The decentralization government bring the decision making closer to the level of the fishing ground, so in a sort of bottom-up process. So the EU legislator defined the general framework while member states develop the implementing measure cooperating with each other at regional level. So also for fishery policy, we have a sort of picture that summarizes the evolution throughout the decade, starting for fishery, including the CAP, in a way to arrive at the new CFP. So the total amount, financial allocation of the fishery policy is around 6.5 billion of euro that are mainly devoted for sustainable fishery, in a way to ensure and generate sustainable jobs and so on. Blue economy start to have a financial identity in the framework of the public policy for fishery sector. In this program, we have only 71 million of euro, but this is a first attempt to witness the relevance of blue economy in the context of fishery policy. Concerning the allocation of the funding around Europe, we saw that Spain is the most resourceful country. Italy is the third country in terms of financial allocation. For Italy, we have 500 million euro, around 500 million euro. And so the top 5 countries, Spain, Italy, France, and Poland, intercept almost half of the overall financial resource. So to summarize, this is the first point that we evaluated to witness the change in policy for the fishery sector. The real question after this very short presentation of the pattern evolution of the public support at agriculture and the fishery sector is how the policy choices are affected by environmental, climatic, and social economic scenario. So in the second part of this presentation, we focused on the overall scenario that surround agriculture and the fishery sector. How you know the biological nature of agriculture and fishery production processes and their strong dependency on the natural and climatic condition induce, among other things, a high degree of uncertainty surrounding the economic performance of farm enterprises in comparison to what happened in other sectors of the economic system. So agriculture, as well as fishery sector, is arguably the sector of production where factors outside managers' control are more heavily responsible for the final result of the enterprise. Something that, of course, has contributed to development of and acceptance of form of public intervention aimed to reducing income variability that have, of course, no parallel in the other sector of the economy. This pattern should witness the in very casting terms what we refer at climate change, market change, economic change in the last 2 decades. Because price fluctuation are a common feature of well-functioning agricultural product markets, as you know. But when these become large, as you can see, for example, 2007, 2010, and in the last 3 years, so that's become larger, unexpected or volatile, they can negatively impact the food security of consumers, farmers, and in entire country. So since 2007, world market have seen a series of dramatic fluctuation in commodity prices. So you could note this very strong volatility on the commodity market. Food price reached their highest level after 30 years during the summer 2008, collapsing in the following winter before rapidly rising again in the following. So similar pattern has been observed in the last 2 years. So the question is, what the reason for this instability? So the reason for this instability, of course, is a first reply could be bounded in the eventuality that international market for agricultural commodities are at the stage on which the new scarcity is shown in all its clarity. In past years, the adjustment of supply to demand was guaranteed by technical progress, as we underlined before while we talk about the mechanization of the CAP in the first decades of the implementation. And the agricultural sector experienced a period of great, so agricultural capacity almost on a global scale. This has been called the Green Revolution. It has seen a remarkable increase in world agricultural production for several decades. Now, we experience a new phase due to the need for more sustainable agriculture, less use of chemical inputs, and due to concerns that having reached a technological barrier such as to be able to achieve only marginal short-term increases. So the long era of abundant food available at low price is over, in my opinion. It has given way to an era that we could call the era of new scarcity. So food prices, variability, and food security, what is the link? It will be clear now that referring market instability, one of the main drivers is the growing higher purchasing power among increasing broad ranges of the population in emerging countries, such as China, India, Brazil, South Korea, and so on. There has been a transition from a period of abundance, characterized by problem of unfair distribution of available resources, to one of structural scarcity that has witnessed in a progressive widening of the schism between food availability and demand against a trend, first time in the more market of prices rises. For many years, this change was not perceived or was, at the very least, underestimated, also from economists. In this overall scenario characterized by Chinese debt increases the animal protein consumers up to 5 times, with the particularity that in China we have 1,300,000,000 of consumers. So this is a very, very huge impact on the global market for commodity. We have also the question related to the climate. So in this feature, you can see that in the last 2 decades, we have a huge increase of natural disaster around the world, especially in North America and Asia. And if you focus it on the EU, you can see that Italy is one of the more exposed countries in Europe against the natural disaster. This picture is also sarcastic because give you the feeling that in the last 3 decades we register a very huge increases in catastrophic events in terms of climatologic, meteorological, hydrogeologic, geophysical, biological terms. So if you agree, I will stop for 50 minutes now, and in a way to start again at 10:40. Okay?
Okay.
Okay, see you in a while.
Okay, thank you.
50 minutes. Ragazzi, io ci sono quando volete, eh.
Here we are, Professor, if you want to continue.
Yeah?
Yes, you're here. Thank you.
Okay. So, concerning the impact of economic impact of climate change on agriculture, and we will focus also for the fishery sector, we should consider what happened in terms of probability distribution. If you consider this Gaussiana as an example of distribution of, I don't know, maximum temperature registered in the last 20 years in Bologna in June, no? So you have that the mean is the value of the distribution that are the higher probability to happen in the future. So if the temperature shifts 1 degree, 2 degree to right, so an increase, so you can see that temperature that were in the tail of the first Gaussiana, in the distribution of the first Gaussiana, now in the second distribution, that is the distribution that try to catch the increase in the temperature, have a higher space of probability than the first distribution. What I would say that respect at this picture, that what that first were characterized by very low probability to happen, now this probability is much higher than in the past. So the eventuality to observe unexpected or very catastrophic event in meteorological climatic terms now is much higher than in the past. So we need to consider this aspect, especially in economic terms, because this change in probability distribution is the main drive that could affect the revenue for farmers and fishery in the future. So the climate change, of course, would be an impact in economic terms. There are a lot of estimate for Central Europe, Southern Europe, and so on. You can see that we will experience a lot of disaster and economic losses from river floods, coastal floods, droughts, and so on. So there is a branch of science that running to try to answer the new question, the growing up from the economic system concerning the economic losses due to climate change. So the main research question has been related to how will the climate in the next 30 years, how will the climate be at the end of the century, and so on. So the main challenges is to understand, predict, and projecting the climate system for the coming season and decades. For that, there is a very, very complicated models that try to combine what we register in terms of atmospheric circulation, radiation, land, and hydrology, ocean circulation, temperature, and so on. So we can see that this branch of the science registered a very, very huge change in the last decades, because we start at the beginning of the century that the main observed variables were river, sea, ice and land surface, and so on. And now we are in charge to combine all these variables in an Earth system models that is more adequate to try to give answer at the question that we underlined before. So the different models try to give answer at question that relate the mid-term, the short-term, and the long-term, because this kind of forecast predictability is very important for the policy decision and in a way to build public policy able to give answer at the new challenges for the human and also in our case for farmers and the fishery. So, you know, there are a lot of prediction concerning wheat yield, maize yield, corn, warming, and so on, in a way to try to build mitigation and adaptation policy. And especially we are now in charge to try to give answer to these 4 points. It is warming almost everywhere. It is warming rapidly. The warming reverse in a long-term cooling. It has been a long time since it has been this warm. What we can see, observing data, is that in the last century, we registered and experienced some trend that has been registered millions of years ago. So you can see that if you look just in the last 1,000 years, so what we registered in the last 5 decades is a huge increase in temperature both for land and oceans. But if you look backward for million and million of years, we can see that in Paleocene ecosystem thermal maximum was higher than now. What is very, very worrying about this increase is the speed of this increase. Because if you compare in the graph the increase in temperature of the last 50 decades compared to the Paleocene in the Ecocene era, you see that we have also, in the last year, we have as a world. So it is a very, very speed increase. So now we have the global that has been, in a way, gridded. So in a way to understand which are the trend for temperature and the precipitation, especially concerning the land. And the same things has been carried out for the temperature of ocean and sea. So you can see that around the world, the near future projections say that in the global scale, we will register till 2040 between 1 degree to 3 degrees of an increase in temperature concerning land and ocean. If you're looking at the seasonal mean precipitation, you can see that we have an increase in some part of the world, for example, in the mid-Africa or in Southeast Asia. But generally, we will assist and decrease in rainfall, especially in Mediterranean area and in South America. Of course, this is just a projection, but it is important to clarify that, especially for rainfall, it's not very important to consider the mean of rainfall, because what is important is the distribution of the rainfall. Because if you have that the rainfall in Bologna in 1987 were 900 millimeters, no? And now you register that the mean is always 900 millimeters. The question is, how these millimeters of rainfall cumulative has been distributed around throughout the years. So what we register in the last year is, you remember the flooding last year in Emilia-Romagna, we registered a huge amount of rain in some period in alternate to a long period of dry. So this is a big question for, especially for farmers, because they are unable to manage this change in rain distribution. Of course, we have also the projection medium long terms, and these kind of projections are very worried because, how you can see, for some projections we have an increase in global scale in temperature around 5 degrees. That was, this would be very, very catastrophic if this kind of projection would be realized. Also in terms of precipitation, we have a project of a long term that will be reduced by a very decrease in rainfall, especially for Mediterranean area. And in terms of scenario, how you can see that in this feature that climate change would affect also not only farmers and the fishery, but would affect the overall economic system. Because, of course, climate change would induce catastrophic events that would affect the overall economic system. The other question strictly related to climate change phenomena is the migration, because we know that migration actually, due to climate change in Central Africa, is higher than migration due to war on other questions. So we have to look very careful at this kind of scenario, because this scenario would depict a very worried time for now, for the next decades. So, although an active area of research, the current and the future effect of long-term climate change on fishery, focusing on fishery, are largely unknown. So climate change, of course, has the potential to impact, as we know, impact the sea surface temperature, the sea level, the ocean circulation pattern. This is another important question. The salinity and the pH. All of these have a direct impact on the abundance and distribution of marine fish. So the effects of climate change will occur in the environment that may already be characterized by environmental stressors, such as depleted fish population and habitat modification. I'm an economist, but I think that climate change are likely to exacerbate these existing stresses on marine fish stocks. Stable, diverse community are generally better able to withstand disturbance. And they think that the impact of climate change will vary among the fisheries. In its most recent assessment, IPCC, for example, predicted that saltwater fishery production may actually be the same, or perhaps higher, if the resource management deficiencies are corrected. So the benefit of increased phytoplankton production might be offset by the cost associated with change in reproductive pattern and migration routes. So the climate change will have a range of impacts. For example, for the Great Barrier Reef, the combined effect of these impacts will reduce the overall health and beauty of the reef, for example. Climate change impacts on the Great Barrier Reef could include increases in the sea temperature, increase in storm frequency and intensity, changes in precipitation, drought and runoff, changing ocean circulation, ocean acidification, sea level rise. So this impact will affect reefs, associated organisms, as well as people in our reef-dependent industry. One of the biggest worries about climate change is that we will harm corals, for example. No? I try to introduce some element, some question that could represent for fishery sector the question related to climate change. So the coral bleaching is a stress response of corals to the prolonged warm temperature, for example. So climate change is warming sea temperature, which is causing more and more coral bleaching to occur. When coral become bleached, they are sick and are less able to recover from other impacts. So why do we care about corals? Corals are the building block of coral reef and provide a structure that creates home for the amazing animals that live on reef. So without corals, reef creatures will lose their homes. So food supply in coral reefs, as we know, they will cease to exist. The ocean acidification. In addition to coral bleaching, scientists and reef managers are very concerned about the recently discovered problem called ocean acidification, because 1/3 of the carbon dioxide we emit on the land is ending up in the ocean and making corals shells weak and brittle and generally less healthy. So coral cores from very old corals on the Great Barrier Reef are telling us that climate is changing. No? Information from corals is used now to help build the global climate record, for example, no? In a way to link to the model that we very in short tried to introduce before. So now I think it is a good time to discuss how scientists know what the climate was like many years ago. So you could discuss where climate records come from, no? Sediment core, tree rings, ice core, and so on. But this is a good opportunity to ask, for example, to the student, to build their own coral core timeline complete with the year they were born, no? Because this is a witness and observation how climate change throughout the decades. One of the aspect that is very underestimated is the impact of the climate change, so the marginal effect of the climate change on the land value. Some of you could question why this is a problem. This is a problem because the land value is the mirror of the value of the agricultural sector, because a land that give us lower yield for wheat, olive oil, tomato. This is a land that decrease its value. And this is an important question because the marginal value of land in agriculture often is used for ask investment in banks, because farmers in Italy have different rule in terms of balance sheet respect the other entrepreneurship of other sector of the overall economic system. So farmers doesn't have duty to present at the end of the year balance sheet. So the best way to have access for credit in a way to make investment in farms is really the value of the land. that represent a warranty for the bank respect to the credit demand for farmers. So the world is changed at the end. We can say that we have a lot of questions that surround the fishery sector and the primary sector, and mainly all this are represented in this picture. No? China increase meat per capita consumer, India increasing milk consumer, Russia increase sugar, and so on. There are a lot of pressure on water because, as you can see, put on the table the consumers 1 kilo of beef costs, in figurative terms, 15,000 liters of water. So beef is very intensive in terms of water, and in a world where water scarcity is a question, we could start to consider that the increase in animal protein consumer from the east of the world should be a very big problem in the next decades. There is a question linked to the land. Land today and more in the future will be a very important asset for the country. So we are witnessing in the last 2 decades the land grabbing phenomena. So we have countries like China, South Korea, Japan that bought millions of hectares around the world. Very, very interesting that also Arabia Saudita and Emirates begin to buy land around the world. So they are ready for the step further to oil and gas. Other question, the concentration of the market for commodity in few countries. So we have corn, sugar, beef, milk that are very concentrated in terms of power market. So in more technical question, why agriculture activity is risky? Because the peculiarity of the production condition in agriculture is very complex, so as you know, and the relevance of the various reasons of income variability and the impact of a given variation in farm revenue on the viability of the farming enterprise in the last decades have hugely changed. So the organization of the agricultural production, its integration in the agri-food chain, the increase in the use by farmers of services such as credit, professional technical assistance, finance and insurance, regulatory system within which farmers operate, and the diversification of income generating activity within rural households are all factors that make the risk faced by today's farmers in developed economy something deeply different and more articulated than what it used to be only a few decades ago. So in the literature, risks are being classified in various ways. One traditional classification distinguishes production risk, sensu stricto, is the possibility of lower than expected output, quantity, and/or quality from price or market risk, either input price raising or output price falling after production. Personal risk, for example, risk of personal illness, accidents. Institutional risk, so the possibility that relevant norms or regulation would change unexpectedly. And although most of the discussion risk in agriculture are focused in the past on production risk, the other dimensions are becoming more and more relevant in the modern agriculture. So, to provide a useful insight in a policy-oriented discussion on the relevance of risk and on the most appropriate means to deal with it, we suggest a three-dimensional classification that distinguishes risk-generating events according to the degree or level of frequency, so from rare to frequent, in terms of severity, for example, the extent of damages caused that could vary from negligible to significant, and in terms of correlation between affected units. So risk can be classified along a line that goes from idiosyncratics, so that events that independently affects single units, single farmers, to systemics, for example, events which simultaneously affects many units, like for the flood last year in the Emilia-Romagna. So we have a sort of risk box that, depending on the combination of the three characteristics, damaging events, might be located in a three-dimensional space, as you can see in the picture, where each vertex of the box corresponds to a prototypical risk. So no real-world event will perfectly correspond to one of the extreme forms of risky events. Nevertheless, the classification highlights the combination of characteristics which are most relevant to the definition of an ideal management tool. So with the exception of the event of type H, at the birth age, for example, events which are frequent and whose negative consequences are significant and systemic, and for which the only beneficial strategy will be to try and avoid them, for example, by not locating, I don't know, the farmer activity in the risk-prone environment. Most of the risk linked to the events depicted in the risk box could be efficiently managed. From a farmer point of view, the best strategy usually calls for comparing the cost to transfer the risk to cost of retaining it. So the possibility to effectively transfer risk depends crucially on the sharing of information between the interested party. Problem of incomplete information are usually responsible for the high level of premium to pay required to transfer risk. We will see later what I mean. To this respect, a fourth dimension could be added to distinguish risk according to their predictability, intended here as the ability, for example, for farmer to associate a reliable probability distribution with the event. And this aspect now, more and more in the future, will be very important, because we know that in a climate change era, the probability distribution of meteorological events are totally changed respect the last decades. So this is a very, predictability will be a very crucial condition for assessing the cost of a given risk management strategy. And is a basic requirement for both insurability, that is the possibility of establishing correct premiums for feasible insurance contract, and the potential of hedging through the use, for example, of financial derivatives. So risk management in agriculture will be shared in two most important phases: ex ante risk management, ex post, that we call risk coping. So the most common risk coping strategy is based on the use of personal financial reserves, such as savings, to smooth consumption when farmers facing varying income. No? So if yield fall or you experience a market crisis, you could use, for example, your save to smooth consumption and the revenue of your family. So the resulting self-insurance is going to be the most efficient risk management option when transaction costs exist that make other forms of risk transfer, such as crop insurance, less attractive. So its cost is given by the opportunity cost of the financial reserves that need to be immobilized. What I mean? I mean that when interest rate is higher, as now, probably will be a good strategy to have save, no, in banks. Instead, when you have a lower interest rate, would be better, for example, use your save to make investments. So this is a very tricky question that every human, every farmers in our case, need to be concerning their strategy. To the other extreme, when the market exists for the ex-ante strategy, you can see that insurance, mutual fund, financial markets are one of the possible strategy for farmers, but they represent one of the choice. I say that because in the last decades in the EU, especially in Italy, public support identify the support at crop insurance as the only strategy available to share risk for farmers. So, using self-insurance diversification, we already emphasized this aspect. And concerning market insurance, how insurance company could manage farmers' risk? They could manage risk collecting premium that farmers pay before the harvest. No, So the first principle of insurance is that premiums of the many pay the losses of the few. So what are the conditions for insurability? First of all, the possibility of the quantification of the damages. No, the post-harvest, if I don't know, if farmers experience the hail instead of flooding, there is a procedure in a way to quantify the damages for crops. Of course, other essential condition is the randomness. This means that the risky profile of me, no, would be not linked to the risk profile of other farmers. Of course, other question very important is the mutuality and the economic sustainability of the contract that the insurance company would propose to the farmer. Which are the limits? The limits for insurability are represented by the asymmetric information, so that ex ante and ex post should happen that concerning the moral hazard question, farmers could alter with his behavior the risk profile. I don't know, if farmers subscribe crop insurance, he could avoid to use, I don't know, water instead of fertilizer. So this behavior could alter his risk profile, and then it would represent a fraud for insurance company. Adverse selection would represent the difference in knowledge concerning the farming profile risk between the the insurance company and the farmers. There is a question that is most important in agriculture and also in the fishery sector, that is represented by systemic risk. What means systemic risk? Systemic risk means that when a catastrophic events occur, all farmers are involved. And this aspect is a characteristic of the primary sector, because in other branch of insurance industry, we don't have this kind of question. If you consider the insurance for bike or car, but there we don't have the systemic risk question, because each person is not linked to others in terms of risk. So if I occur in an accident, my accident doesn't modify the probability of an accident of another person. So in agriculture, this is not possible, because if we have drought, we have flooding, all insured portfolio, all farmers are involved in the risk at the same time. So this is one of the main questions that foster public intervention in the crop insurance. Go away first, because I would show you before the end what we mean for actuarial fair insurance. So insurance, actually fair insurance where the premium is equal to the expected value of the payout. What do I mean? Assume that you could buy hail insurance or I don't know, wind insurance, flood insurance, and so on. So you have 100,000 euro or dollars of expected revenue, and you have 80% of chance to lose 7,500 of euro of your revenue because crop fails. So your utility is U, depending on V1. So the risk income is the probability that you realize $100,000 with probability of 0.2%, or that you realize a revenue of $25,000 with a probability of 0.8%. So the actually fair insurance is represented by the picture that you see in the slide, and the expected revenue in this case would equal to $60,000. So if you don't subscribe insurance, if you didn't get insurance, your utility would be represented in the pictures. Utility without insurance would be 189.7. This is the generated by this form of utility function. If you get insurance, your utility increase at 200, and you can see that the utility of person that subscribe insurance would be higher than the utility of person that didn't subscribe insurance. Which is the question that is related to the subscription of insurance, especially for farmers. Is insurance ever fair? Unfortunately not. Actual insurance premiums are rarely actually fair, partially due to firm making profit, but also due to other factors that we already introduced. So administration cost, but especially moral hazard, desertion, and in agriculture, systemic risk. So what is the maximum amount that someone will pay above actually fair premiums? Risk premium is the maximum amount of money that a risk-averse person will pay to avoid taking a risk. So the maximum amount a person will pay in premiums above factory fair premiums. And I would stress that even risk-loving people consider themselves risk-averse for a large amount of money. So when your revenue, if we're talking about the farmers, are very high, so farmers, even if risk-loving, you would consider the possibility to subscribe a crop insurance. So this is important to introduce because from the CAP 2014-2020 program, we have, as we introduced before, a role for public policy to support crop insurance, mutual fund, and income stabilization tool. it is the first time, has been the first time that CAP introduced a support for risk management tools, because European Union taking account that the climate change and market volatility would represent a very important question for the revenue stability for farmers in Europe. So in 2013, risk management moved from the first to the second pillar of the CAP, and based their intervention to financial contribution to crop insurance, for financial compensation to mutual funds, and financial compensation to income stabilization tool. It is a funds that cover drop of income farmers. We have in 2019 midterm review of these support, and the most important things is that the support for the three tools that has been introduced by the CAP increase up to 70%. So farmers that aim to subscribe a crop insurance or aim to participate in mutual funds or income stabilization tool receive from EU a public support up to 70%. An important question is how climate change affects the probability. That is a very important question, because when we build crop insurance contract, or we set a mutuality fund, we need to say how much farmers have to pay to participate for this tool. So recalling the lottery, we have three key elements in a lottery: the set of possible outcome, that we say generally the word state; the linked probability, this is associated at each word state; and the corresponding value for each word state. So this means that if we throw a dice, we face uncertain outcome, but we have 6 possible outcomes. Each outcome have, in the case of dice, of course, the same probability, and we could link it, an amount of euro corresponding at the 6 possible outcome, corresponding of the number of the face dice. So we could represent the lottery with a decision tree that we see in the slide. And the expected value of a random variable x is the value of x which manifests itself on average. So if we look to find the x value, we need to weight the x value in each state of the word with the probability that the single state of the word could happen. So the overall expected value of the lottery bounded with 2 possible outcomes would be P1 Q1 minus P B2, where P is the probability of the first outcome and V represents the value that is linked to the outcome. So if V is equal 1, 2, we have this kind of representation. So what is the relevance of climate change in this environment? The question is how climate change would affect the state of the world. How climate change would affect the probability distribution. How climate change would affect also the value that we get to each world state. So this is a very crucial aspect, because concerning the world state, now we start to experience catastrophic event that never experienced in the past. So this eventuality enlarge the world state respect at the world state that we experienced till last decades ago. At the same way, the linked probability for each world state change, because if we say that the maximum temperature in June in Bologna in the last century, I don't know, has been in mean 27 degrees, no? If we experienced an increase in temperature, of course, the linked probability of, for the world state in the previous year will be affected by of the new world state, of the new happening in terms of meteorological and climatological events. And the same way, the corresponding value for each world state changing, because last year we experienced a never expected flooding in Emilia-Romagna. We experienced 6 billion of euro of damages in the region. We never experienced something like that. So this would mean that new world state would be linked at a corresponding value in terms of damages that never has been experienced in the past. So this is a very, very abruption in the market of insurance, reinsurance, and financial market, because this means that transfer risk will be characterized by higher costs for the insurance company. So this is a very starting point. So I would represent some kind of insurance tool, parametric, and so on. I think that you are very tired and bored from this presentation. And I would leave you just with a few suggestions that mean that we need in the future in a way to tackle this new question that coming in the debate for agriculture and fishery sector. We need to for supplementary knowledge on territory, farmers, fishery, and so on. We need, I strongly forced on that, we need the multidisciplinarity, because economists have to talk with agronomists, with biology, and so on. There is a need for new tools, also for technical support and training on the territory. Of course, we need to deliver a new model for TCAP, but this is another matter. Thank you for your attention. Okay, if you have some questions, some
Yes, we have a question.
Yeah.
Okay. So, did you already text it?
Yeah.
Just 1 second. We're getting some questions from the audience.
Sorry, I don't understand.
There's a question. So the question is, how do global initiatives for climate change adaptation intersect with evolving consumer preferences in aquaculture, shaping the future of sustainable seafood consumption?
This is a big question. This is a big question because is very tricky in a way. First of all, we should start to implement adaptation and mitigation for aquaculture production, because I suspect we are very late in this aspect. And then what consumer prefer in the future is a big task, is a big challenge, because we know that consumers start to prefer product for fishery aquaculture because they decrease of beef, but I think that it's very complicated now to have a clear outlook of what consumers prefer in the next year at this stage, honestly. Because we have in parallel other questions that often are underestimated, because when consumers have less money to spend, no, this is a very complicated time, because we have war around the world, we have a lot of commercial questions around the country, and this inequality could affect hugely consumers' patterns. So I think that we should evolve to look at the single sector and analyze the single consumption in a way to it doesn't consider happen in general terms, because I suspect that the demand for high quality food will decrease the next year, because consumers doesn't have money to spend for that. So I didn't reply at your question, but the honest answer is I don't know.
Okay, thank you. One other question is more of a curiosity. We've all seen the protests of the tractors that happened in the past few days, past few weeks. Would you be able to venture what it is actually about?
Because farmers has been for 6 decades the main actor of the CAP, of the Common Agricultural Product. And now they are experiencing a lot of questions that would affect their revenue. Climate change, market volatility, increasing costs. They are all questions that have a lot of difficulty to match with the Green Deal object of the European Union. Because if you have outside of European Union country that doesn't have as objective the biodiversity, state of, I don't know, environment and so on, we have the European farmers are in a position that they doesn't compete with other countries. So the question is how we could guarantee the revenue at our farmers, also in a context, in a way we should pursue the objective to respect the environment, biodiversity, and so on. I think this is also a big question. This is also a policy question, first of all. And I don't know, I think that we, in the next future, we will see a sort of coming back in the past for the CAP, because this is unsustainable for our farmers.
Okay, thank you very much. Do we have any more questions? No? Okay.
Enjoy your lunch.
Thank you very much, Professor. It was a pleasure.
Bye. I will send you the presentation.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
You can send it directly to Professor Goffredo, to Stefano.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Have a nice day.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.